So we today are going to be talking about leaving the cult. We would like to know what has led the people here today to leaving, your personal experience, and any tips that we can give for people who are considering leaving. So we've got with us today Tracy, and we've got also Mark, who you've seen on the other episodes, and Ben also too. So should we go to Tracy first and just ask how you come to leave the cult that we know as Jehovah's Witnesses?
Hi. I would say I left in around 2019. I actually physically left my family home that I was living in. And actually, my ex husband is an elder, and I was extremely unhappy. I've been unhappy for a very, very long time in our marriage. We have two children together, and I just couldn't understand how I could be so unhappy in a relationship where you are in the quote unquote truth, and Jehovah gives you all the desires of your heart, and he's supposed to make you happy, and being this wonderful truth is supposed to be such a great thing. And I just couldn't understand how I was so unhappy. And I had prayed and prayed and prayed about it, and I had done so much. I even decided to start doing more personal study in an attempt to make my life a lot better and make me feel a lot happier. And I wasn't happy. I was really unhappy. It got to the point actually where I felt suicidal, and I just couldn't understand how you can feel that way, being in a place that is supposed to be the happiest place on earth, the best life ever. I just couldn't, I just couldn't understand that. It just didn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
I've been trying for years to kind of come to terms with it or rationalize it. And each time I would do a bit more personal study and spend more time on the ministry and go to the meetings and answer up, and it just never really got any better. And I think part of it as well was that as an elders family, you've got a lot of pressure on you to be the pillar of the congregation and to make sure that you're doing all the right things. And
Yeah.
I
So,
never
so were
quite.
you raised in the
No,
organisation? No.
no, I wasn't raised in it. I came into the organisation via my mother, who got baptised back in the 80s, and I followed suit. I got baptised when I was I think I was 15 when I got baptised, actually. So, yeah, my mother started studying when I was about maybe 9 or 10. And then, obviously, I just kind of, it all fell into place from there, really. And I just continued to, I was a model witness. I was very good. I auxiliary pioneered straight from school. I didn't go to college. I didn't, go into higher education or anything like that. No, but it was really funny. I always had a really strong desire to work and to excel. I always wanted to do really well in whatever job I was doing, but I knew also there was also that conflict about being a pioneer and being a good witness. But yeah, so no, I wasn't born in, but I was in from a very young age, I would say.
Yeah. No, I can really relate to a lot of what you said. Probably in a similar position myself when I left. So how did you actually come to leave? If you can share as much as you can.
Yeah, it was I had made plans, and the leaving again for me was very much about my unhappy situation. It wasn't actually about the religion itself. And so I had made plans in my head to leave. And part of my plans, I think I always say I was quite lucky in the sense that I had a bit of an inheritance. I had some money, but I also worked, and I worked full time, and I was always kind of self sufficient in that sense. So I had planned, and I'd planned for years to move out of the family home. I was waiting for my children to be at an age where I wasn't going to disrupt their life. I still believed it was the truth as well. So I wasn't actually trying to take them out of the religion. I just know I needed to go. I know I needed to be out of that relationship and out of that situation. So I'd made plans in my head to move out. And what I'd actually done was I had applied for social housing through the local authority, and they'd actually assessed me and said, yeah, I could get social housing, but I was going to be like right at the bottom of the queue because obviously I worked and I was already living somewhere. Then when I got this inheritance, I was quite lucky. I was able to then, for somewhere to live, and I was able to purchase somewhere. So that's how I physically left. But even at that point, I was physically out but mentally in, so I was a pony. So I didn't actually, I still felt that the religion was the right thing. It wasn't right for me at that time. I was going to go back. I would always go back at some point, but just not now. I just needed to leave. So I physically left. And if you live in London, it's a massive place. It's great. You can literally move about 5 miles away and it's like, a completely different country. So it's great. So I moved across London, bought myself a place, and I had the headspace to be in a better place mentally, and also to just kind of settle with myself and kind of put the truth on hold until I was ready to go back. And at that point, it took me about 2 years, and then I kind of woke up. My sister, who had been out of the organisation for a very long time, she sent me a video, the Australian Royal Commission, and I actually thought it's fine because, it's the governing body member. I'll watch that. It's absolutely fine. And I was absolutely horrified. I literally watched it and just thought, what the absolute... I just was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. I literally can't believe I'm seeing this. And also, I think I was really hurt by the way that the victim was treated. So if you've ever watched the clip with the Australian Royal Commission, the governing body member, it wasn't very caring. It wasn't very loving. None of that was there, and I just felt I felt betrayed. And from that day forward, I was just like, I can't believe it. I spoke to my sister, and I said, we were in a cult. We were in a cult.
So you realised together?
No, she knew for years. She just didn't share anything with me because I was still in. I was still mentally in. So she didn't share anything. She'd been out for years and knew it. But I'd always I think she just kind of gave me the space to get there myself. And when I was ready, then she was like, here you go.
So would you say you faded, or was there were you disfellowshipped, or it was kind of a fade?
No, I faded. I did a pretty much what I call a hard fade. I left because I physically left my family home, and I did that in 2019. And but I think from around 2017, I stopped going to the meetings and going on the ministry and stopped praying and stopped doing all those things. I just stopped because I was so unhappy. So it was easy for me to then, when I physically left, to kind of cut that off. But again, to me, it was, I don't know, maybe it was just my personality, or because I needed that space. I actually had to physically kind of cut everything off. I needed to have that free space and that time to myself to be able to kind of process and step away from all of the stuff that I'd been dealing with. And it was funny because the minute I left, I didn't feel suicidal anymore, and I just thought that was really weird as well. It's just like, again, this was supposed to be this wonderful spiritual paradise where you have all these friends and all these people around you to support you, and I didn't feel that. And the minute I left and I was in my own space, I was fine. I was absolutely fine.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting that, because you talk about various ways that you exit, whether it's a disfellowshipping or a fade. And I was talking to somebody at work and they said, well, can't you just leave? So it's not really that straightforward, because if you're disfellowshipped, it's quite cut and dry. But if you fade, you still lose everything. And I said, if you stay within the community, whether that's being in the home with your husband, wife, whoever, children who are still witnesses, you're going to be constantly bombarded with, oh, well, this person's spiritually weak, they need help. How are you doing? It's just going to be so in your face that you do, whichever way you do it, you do sort of need to just completely remove yourself from it for your own sanity sometimes.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's funny because obviously I'd still I went to the memorial. This is before kind of, waking up. So I went to the memorial. I went to the convention. I think I went to the convention at the Excel. And so I was still around, witnesses, and they would say things, Jehovah loves you, and, he's still there, and, he's thinking about you, and all this kind of stuff. And it was really, to me, that was an emotional, that had a toll on my mental health as well. I just thought I couldn't do this. I can't be around hearing that. Again, I was still kind of pomey. I was still kind of mentally in, but I knew that my lifestyle, the life that I lived as a witness, was not making me happy. So it didn't really help. So, I needed to completely kind of cut that off in order to kind of maintain my mental health and maintain my sense of self as well. Yeah.
So how about you, Mark? How did you make that break and say, I'm no longer a Jehovah's Witness?
I think I mentioned on another podcast that I didn't actually identify myself for some time. So I was very much physically and mentally out at PMO.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is that members of the cult said, we're not a cult because you can leave whenever you want. We don't stop you from leaving. You can walk away. We don't hold you back from doing that. However, as you've just mentioned that, Tracy, it's that they like to make you feel that they want you and still want to keep you there because they think that your life is obviously at stake. But what it also does, it gives them confirmation bias. Yep. That the more people agree with them, the more right they are. So you get people saying Jehovah loves you, and don't put this down to men, imperfect men, all this kind of thing. But I always found that they say, yes, you can leave the cult. What they don't tell you are the consequences of leaving the cult. You lose your identity, as we've said before, but you also lose your family, either immediate family or the family of the brothers and sisters. So it's a big black hole for a lot of people out there, isn't it? And so when you're physically in it but mentally out of it, you've still got the social club there. You're doing it for that reason. But the opposite, when you're physically out but mentally in, that's a different world, isn't it? That you're not going to the meetings, but you still believe in Jehovah. You still believe that there is something going to be happening there. So it's a different mentality that you have to have. Did that cause you a lot of angst during that period? Where you still believed, but you felt that you couldn't go and attend any meetings?
Yeah, exactly. I completely believed. And so I think even at one point, because, then we had lockdown straight after 2020. So I got the link for the congregation that I used to attend. And I was attending online. And they used to have the little, chatty before and chatty afterwards. And people would be like, oh, look, there she is, wave and stuff. And I was just like, oh, God. It was so difficult. I just couldn't do it. It was very, very hard, because you lost all of that community, all of those friends, in inverted commas, that you had. I literally have, all of those people are no longer in my life. I literally have no contact with, I would say, 99% of them. I still have contact, obviously, with my children, but all of that community, you literally lose all of that. You have to start afresh, and it can be it can be really daunting. It can be really hard. We've seen it already. You look on Reddit and the JW Facebook. People have taken their lives because of that complete loss of community, and it's horrible. Everyone has to go through that process of how they deal with that loss of their community and loss of all of their support that they had. And it's not an easy thing. I think that we all have to struggle with finding our community and finding ways of coping with that loss. It's a huge thing.
This is the point that Shelley is trying to really get here, is that strategy. What strategy is there I mean, Shelley, what would you, if you could do it all again, what would you do? How would you do it differently?
I would have probably planned a bit more. And so I think I might have got my ducks in a row a little bit more and maybe got my head straight. I think I knew something wasn't right with the beliefs because there were too many of them that made me feel really, really uncomfortable. And I got to a point where I was really struggling to ignore the uncomfortableness that it gave me to believe those things. Or there was a very specific time when that horrible Caleb and Sophia video came out about two women marrying mummies and mummies and that, and I watched it. Yeah, that was horrid, that video, and I watched it because I knew it was there, and I didn't watch it with my kids. I watched it and I couldn't stand it. I hated it. And I thought, I can't show my kids this. This is awful. It's horrible. They were shown it because the dad showed it to them. And I never said to anybody, I never voiced it, but I think it was just a little catalyst. It was just a little something. And I think if you've recognised that, if I could go back to that, pinpoint that in time, think where something just made me, I've really just something, I'm not right here. I think then I would have maybe then done a bit more research before leaving, just to make sure everything was clear and I knew. It's very difficult to say, isn't it? We are as humans, we do act emotionally, and sometimes we just have to bite the bullet and go for it. And even if it's not the best time to do it, we sometimes just have to do it. I mean, Ben, would you say that you were physically out, mentally in at stages?
Yeah. And even when we got back, when COVID happened, it had been many years since I'd been a witness. But being at home during what felt like the end of the world brought a lot back, which caused issues. Like, I struggled, but like, it's not there anymore, but like you question it. You're like, oh, maybe, but you do, and you battle it, but you get rid of it.
Yeah, I often think that must just be the most awful thing, to think that you could be about to be destroyed. And you just couldn't do it. You couldn't do what they wanted you to do, and now it means you're going to be destroyed. And like battling that feeling for a short time is awful enough, but to have to do that for a long time, and I'd say to anybody, I think just go for it and do the research. Don't be scared, because the quicker you can get that right in your head that it is basically absolute BS, the quicker you can then get moving with other things. I think once you've resolved that in your head, then you can move along a bit more. But
and realise really it's a game. You are in a game of cat and mouse. So someone described to me as a game of Monopoly. When you step away from the game of Monopoly, people don't come along and start mortgaging all your properties and stuff like that. I mean, it depends on your family, I suppose. But he described it as, I stopped playing Monopoly. He just walked away, and then when people would ring his door, he just simply wouldn't answer, or he would be over the top friendly to them. That was the other way he used to go about it. That was his exit strategy.
Yeah. And so, Mark, because I know you said your daughter said, I can't talk to you anymore, so I'm presuming you were disfellowshipped, or you disassociated yourself, or what sort of led to that final?
Yeah, my marriage was on the rocks for a good 6-7 years before I left, and I found somebody else, and she decided that was the way that she was going to treat me. And I was working in London, she lived elsewhere, and I said, I'd love to meet up with you in London when you come down. And she said, that's when I got the letter saying, can't talk to a disfellowshipped person. Right. I was no longer her father. I was no longer dad. Yeah. And when you get that kind of mentality put into somebody, you then realise this is a cult. This is, and I chastised myself for a long time, actually bringing her up in this kind of environment. You know, I felt responsible for doing that, and she's still in the cult as well. So we haven't spoken for 20 years, and it's been, you know, I've got a different life now, a new life, and I think of her every day. However, we'll never meet again. unless she decides to wake up, as it were.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting thought, isn't it? I didn't come across this for many, many years, that you actually wake up from this, that you're in a sleep, effectively. You're sleepwalking in a wrong direction. And then suddenly when you wake up and you think, how on earth did I put up with that for so long? For some people, it gives them the feeling that they've wasted their lives. For others, it's the start of a brand new life for them. And so when you, if you're on the brink of leaving, you think, well, that's my life. The way I thought of it was, yes, that was my life. But now, when I was in my 40s, I've got an opportunity to live another half of my life in a totally different way.
Absolutely.
And by thinking it that way, then it wasn't something which I hankered after. You know, being a witness gave me good friends, you know, admit it, very, very good friends. It was just they often say this, don't they? The rank and file are good people, but it's the governing body who is taking them in the wrong direction. And so when you leave it, they say, well, they're imperfect men. So, you know, don't stop worshipping Jehovah. Keep your worship of Jehovah there. And then you say, okay, I'll worship Jehovah in my way then. Then they say, no, that you can't do that. You've got to come to the Kingdom Hall. You've got to go out and service. You've got to go to conventions, all these kind of things. And you think, well, you didn't say that, you know. So, they're imperfect men. They make mistakes. They claim the light's getting brighter. Proverbs 4 is not about prophecy.
It's not.
You know. And the faithful and discreet slave class is not about prophecy. It's a parable. So you start to see these things, and the whole construction of your life and your belief system starts to fall apart. Yeah. And when
very
that happens,
quickly.
Very quickly, yes. Yeah. And then you see another part of the building demolished, and then another part. And it's a bit like the Twin Towers, you know, when they started falling, it was like the belief system in a person
just
completely falling apart there. And then you've got the opportunity to rebuild. And it's the speed of that rebuilding, isn't it, Tracy, that you've got to be thinking in terms of, where do I want this to be in the future now? So what are you seeing now as your future with your mindset? Where's the future going to be taking you?
I think for me, I always was, maybe I was a bit of a rebel. I was always a bit headstrong. And so I always, like I said at the beginning, I kind of always pursued work as my outlet. But I'm not saying work is everything. I think it gave me an outlet, and it gave me the stability and the security to be able to leave, but also just finding my own community and finding myself, just understanding what I like, what I don't like, what I want to do, where I want to be, you know, and really, really enjoying what I have now. I think that's really, really important to me. It's like, I think like you were saying, could kind of hanker back and say, oh, you know, look how much of my life I've wasted. You know, I'm in my 50s now, and I think to myself, oh my God, I spent all that time. But actually, the thought that I can do absolutely whatever I want going forward, I can have the life that I want, I can actually pursue the things that make me happy. I don't have this guilt and this fear and this worry that, you know, there's this great tribulation coming and all these things. I think it's just about living in the now, and that really gives me a lot of pleasure. Just absolutely, like, I'm just going to enjoy it now. I'm just going to enjoy the things that I have now.
Ultimately,
you know?
this is more about the strategy of exiting. What I guess Shelley and I can take from you is that you kind of got out when you were 50. But what if you had woken up before? You know, would you have felt any different?
I never thought about that before, actually.
Well, we shouldn't really think about it. I think that's kind of key. We shouldn't really think about it because, as we said, hindsight is definitely 2020.
Yeah, you always kind of go, oh my goodness me, you know, I can't believe it. But I think I do look at it slightly differently. Yes, I have some wonderful ex-JW friends. I've got such a massive community of friends now. It's really wonderful. Every time on the Facebook someone joins, it just makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
Literally. Another one. I'm like, another one.
Freedom.
I know. And I always look through to see if I know them as well. And there are a couple of people that I know, like personally, from there. So that gives me so much joy, gives me so much happiness to see people leaving. and to actually start living their life and enjoying themselves. But some people do kind of have that anger, and I think it's like that whole thing about going through grief, isn't it? You go through grief and you get angry and you get despondent, all of those things, and that's what happens when you leave. But I'm past the anger. I think I'm just at the stage where, I'm just starting to rebuild this life. I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to just really enjoying myself and enjoying life. Kind of going back to the earlier question about what do you need to do? You do need to plan. If you are in a place at this moment where you know that this is not for you anymore and you want to leave, you do need to plan. You do need to think about your exit strategy. You need to think about, I think, one of the biggest things, and it's a good thing you mentioned, Kyle, about having some form of organisation or some form of charity to help people to leave, but it's about having that financial stability or some kind of support to give you the exit strategy. I know there could be like teenagers or young people still living at home with their families who are struggling because, where will you live? Where will you move to? What will happen to you? And so it's important to investigate, look into those things, find out what you can do. Look at the local authorities. All the local authorities across England have the support and have options for people wanting to exit a coercive and controlling environment. So you can definitely look at getting support from local authorities. Speak to your GP, especially around counselling and therapy and getting help through that as well. There's lots of resources out there, and I think as witnesses, as us as former witnesses, we think that the world is a horrible place and that there's no one going to be there. There's no one going to be there like your brothers and sisters and like the organisation to help you, and that's not true. Yes, there's not all wonderful things in the world, but there are lots of support. There's loads of support out there, and there's loads of help that people can get. And even if you just put something on Reddit or put something in the JW Facebook, there's always people there to help and support you in anything that you need. So ask for the help, but also investigate as much as you can and see what you can get.
Ben, what would you say as a young person? I mean, I can't remember if you said you were baptised or not, but
no, I wasn't baptised.
No, and I think, I didn't leave at that stage in my life, so it was a bit different. But I do think it's important if you're a young person, would you say, and you've got any doubts, just to put that baptism off.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Absolutely. Don't do it if you're not sure. Don't do that step. But also don't expect, if you don't do that step, that you won't get the shunning. I did it specifically not to get shunned, and I still got shunned. And if they offer you some kind of way that you can maybe make it a bit longer, I would always say don't. It landed up causing a lot of trauma to me, because I eventually got kicked out, but had gone through a series of meetings. Well, it was a study, they called it, where they tried to basically change my mindset, which I soon found out was actually known as conversion therapy, and I've only
They tried to pray
very recently learned.
Pray the gay away, huh?
Yeah, with strategies that a witness was always told not to do, such as looking at explicit material and of the opposite sex.
As if that's going to change your core personality.
And I was meant to touch myself so that I knew that was nice. And if I started to think of the other, then I was to eat horrible things and like bitter aloes and stuff like that to get a horrible and it made me feel sick. It's more damaging to stay and go through more, because you've already got work to unpick what they've sown into you. So you've already got to unpick. Whereas if they go through it again, it makes it 10 times worse, because it's a fresh wound that you're then picking apart, and it leaves a lot of trauma behind when you do cut ties. And I think the hardest thing to do, especially with family, is to reciprocate with the shunning, because you will think that they're coming to you because they've realised they've been wrong or they've done wrong, and they've realised maybe they've settled, they look happy, they've got a partner, or they've settled, they're their own person, and we were a bit tough. That's not what's going. I can't say for your particular person, but I'd say that pretty sure they're trying to get you back to meetings, and they will come in and they will toy with you nearly and be really friendly to everyone, and learning that maybe them coming back into your life is not as genuine as it may seem, because, for example, I had my family come in and out. I had them come in once because I'd been sexually assaulted, and then a few months down the line kick me back again, but I was saved by two lovely lesbians. Their reasoning was because I had been sexually assaulted, it would make me realise it was because I was gay that it had happened. So they came in, it was my fault. They came in, realised I'm not going to be a witness again after that, got rid of me again, and they came back in during COVID. They knew we were engaged, and then I got a letter from my dad. I've got it written down, basically saying that he worries for me. My dad is much nicer when it comes to wording. He worries for me, and that at the time we had a son, and that it would be nice for him to have a chance of knowing the truth. But at the end of the letter, he signed it off as, we do care about you. You don't have to tell us, don't have to answer this letter. You don't even have to bring it up in conversation. Just let you know we do care, sort of thing. And I never heard, it was never brought up. I never brought it up. They didn't bring it up. It was fine. And then 6 months down the line, I get a letter from my mum going, we hear you have a date for your wedding, and basically disowning me, mentioned the letter from my dad and how abhorrent it was that I hadn't dared bring it up in conversation, even in passing. And basically I was the prodigal son, and they use a lot of things, like a lot of, I had chanted at me was, man should not lie with man, which is a scripture, and I have learned so much about that scripture because it has been hard-grained into my brain, and that it's thought to be a mistranslation, and it happened towards, I think it's between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, it changed. But it was, man should not lie with a young boy, and is more leaning towards paedophilia than the homosexual that it is now used, because it wasn't really the biggest problem back then. Like, we look back at civilizations and it's normal in them civilizations, but you see the Bible changes as the more Western world comes into effect, where we're these really strong Christians with these really strong values, and homosexuality is wrong. It should be man with woman. And so the scripture changes to fit. They see it as, spiritual enlightenment, and we need to update. But it's not a revision that makes it, it's not a true revision. But yeah.
So you're trying to work out the point at which you exit and what strategy you use. It sounds like you didn't, I'm not being blunt here, but your strategy was kind of thrown upon you.
I had no strategy.
Other
than I was planning a soft leave. Like I was planning to go off very gently. I mean, I'd started it, especially when we moved congregations. I wasn't going to half the meetings. I never went to service. I never did studying, bits like that. And I was slowly drifting. And then I got caught on a date, and a witness best friend turned round and said that I had to tell my parents, or he was, and he was driving there now.
None of his damn business.
So I had to do it through a text. Now, at that time, my mum had just lost her mum. 2 weeks. Her mum had been dead. And I'm blamed for every bit of pain that she had, because even in her letter, the fact that she found out that I was a liar the weeks after her mum dying, and the amount of pain I caused. And I think because of how I would never have come out, over text, but I was in a hurry because my friend had told me he was going there now. So I knew I had to get there first. I would have never come out so close to my nan. I would have come out in my own time. But that time was chosen for me by someone who was supposed to be my best friend. But yeah, so I never got the luxury of choice.
Yeah. And I think this is the other point as well, Shelley, is you've heard us all now. You're listening to this, you've heard us all. We've all spoke about the strategies and the things that we've used. There is an emotional and psychological cost to the way that you exit. You have to choose it wisely. Some people are stronger. I know a few people that are still attending meetings only to pull the information, to feed it back to authorities. I've spoken to people that are still actively doing it.
I don't know how they can.
No, I couldn't. I
can't.
I couldn't. So my strategy was, initially I was trying to do a gentle fade. In the end, it was a Band-Aid. Rip it off. There was a really heavy emotional and psychological cost, and actually, do you know what? Financial as well, because I needed therapy. I needed a lot of help. And at this point, I think it's a really good moment to point out the resources and the support that is available. Over to you, Shelley, for that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest expert on what's out there, reaching out to Facebook groups, and you've got organisations like Faith to Faithless who will signpost you in the right direction. And as Tracy said earlier, even reaching out to local authorities to see what help's available. I know sometimes these things are easier said than done, but I think it's the same as when we said about taking your first step. Just reach out to one person. I reached out to a friend who I knew was disfellowshipped, but we grew up together, and she had an unusual surname, and I thought, I reckon I can find her on Facebook. I found her on Facebook, and that was it, because it was just that one little bit. Found her on Facebook. She said, oh yeah, join this Facebook group. Oh, do you know Jill? Do you know? Yeah, they're all in this group. Remember, they used to, we grew up with these people. We used to hang out when we were teenagers. And from there, then you've got a plethora, as we've said before, this word of resources. So it literally is sometimes just that pick that one thing that you're comfortable with, be it Facebook, Twitter. Just speak to somebody, and then they'll plug you into the network, because the network's quite vast. And there's something for everybody. It's a vast network.
I'm going to plug Reddit again, purely for the reason that it's anonymous. Reddit you can do absolutely anonymous.
As Ben said, I think when I was listening to what he said, be realistic. It's very unlikely, extremely unlikely that it's not going to cause you any pain. There will be some pain somewhere. It could be immense. It could feel paralysing. It could be fairly smoothish, but there will be pain. It will be. So just accept that. It will hurt, but it's worth it. No pain, no gain, and all that. So it's just worth it. Bite the bullet. Brace yourself. Do it. No, I'll hand over, and I'll just say, do you want me to just say, has anybody else got any other final points that they wanted to?
I was going to point out also, if you're looking at therapy, especially if you've been brought up in the truth, then look for therapists that are trained in high control religion and PTSD.
Yes.
Another therapy to look at, which is very good for PTSD, is called EMDR, which is an eye movement something, and it's a bit like an awake hypnosis. You're awake, so you don't have to worry about anything, but they make you look at things or tap or sounds across your head, and it will unlock things. It will unlock pasts that you didn't know you had. I can't remember past 10 years young. There's nothing. I'm going for it to find out the rest of the trauma sort of thing. But then, as I said to her, because I told her everything that had happened in my life, And she turned around and she said, "This is quite usual. There's no batter." She didn't seem fazed at all. And she says, "But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to burn your house down first. You can't build a house on broken foundations." She said, "So we've got to go back to year dot and work forwards, because we have to rewrite everything that they've put into your head." So there is a lot of therapies out there to help you, and like, even if you can't remember, if you feel silly, you go to a therapist and you sit there and you're like, "I can't remember," then there are ways that you can remember. It can be painful to remember, but the pain is there to then rewire your brain and make it happier, so you can remember the happy times instead of just the bad times when you were a child.
A good therapist will do that.
Yeah. It's a total recalibration, really, of what your brain's there for. I mean, your brain, in our species, it's there for our safety and security. And we maybe turn to religion because we feel that it's a safety blanket for us. And then when it doesn't work out for us, then we feel that we've been let down in some way. Yeah. So what it's doing is it's recalibrating what you have experienced, and you're reassessing the meaning of that. So as most psychologists will say, it's not what happens to you, it's the meaning that you attach to what happens to you. For some people, they could go through a really terrible experience and it ruins them for the rest of their lives. For others, that terrible experience could mean
there's strength.
I'm now going to be strong, I'm going to be a different person because of this. I always remember I can't remember the exact film, it was Indiana Jones, where he was going to go across a chasm to get the cup of Jesus.
It was the temple.
Oh,
it was the Last Crusade. The one where he said,
okay.
Jehovah.
Yeah, I remember that.
They did, didn't they? But I do remember that he wanted to get across the chasm, but he couldn't get across there because and then there was a guy, an old crusader, wasn't there, in the room where he was going to get the cup, and he said, "Before I take this next step, I've got to have faith." And he took the step and the bridge appeared. And I've always thought about that and thought, that's what we've got to do. If we're leaving, if we're having an exit strategy, sometimes we have to have the faith that even though we can't see what our future is going to be, that it will appear if we take that first step. If you take that first step and actually go in the direction on that journey towards where you want to be, that it doesn't have to be absolutely clear what that future is going to be. You might just have a cloudy outline of it, but it's going to take you there. And as you were saying, Ben, you recalibrate the meaning of what you had before, and you learn from that. You learn from that experience. And so you are not that person anymore. You've changed your identity. You become the kind of person that attracts a different future. And if you do that, you step out, not like Indiana Jones did, into a world that isn't produced for you yet. As the saying goes, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so if you create a future for yourself that's allowing you to say, thank you for that past, I learned an awful lot from that past, my future now is on a different path. Yeah. And that path isn't there yet, but as Indiana Jones found, when he took the first step, the path appeared.
I love the fact you brought in pop culture to that. That's great.
I wanted to say one last thing, actually, that I thought would be useful, and just from watching certain, XJW videos and stuff, but also for myself, what I found really, really, really useful was my worldly friends. And that really gave me a massive amount of support. I found people that are genuine friends, genuinely cared about me, genuinely thought about, my journey and my life. And when I told them about how I was feeling, they gave me really good advice, but also advice from my perspective. It wasn't about, let's turn to this scripture and see what it says here. Let's refer to this. Thank you. Let's refer to the watch. Watch that. If you've got your app on you. No, it wasn't that. It was all about, what is good for me and what was going to be helpful for me. And that was, again, I think one of the most powerful things in my journey, having people around me who supported me and who were just concerned about me. It wasn't about, me and this other, entity and organization and this you know, I'm sorry, I don't believe in God in that way anymore, but, you know, this God out there who potentially is going to do X, Y, or Z. So, yeah, for me, that was very, very, very powerful and very helpful. And, yeah,
helped with your exit.
Helped with my exit. And, you know, we were always being told that, you know, the worldly people are terrible and they're going to take you out of the truth. You know, actually, you might need those worldly people to help you get out of the organization. So if you have that and you have people that can do that, yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Absolutely.
My final thought on this is, if they had the truth really, they would be the happiest people in the world.
Yeah.
Why on
they
earth?
wouldn't need to shun.
Of course. Why on earth are they so depressed? You know, I've very rarely found really happy witnesses. I've found much happier people in the world.
Yeah.
Why was that the case? Oh, I now know.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd like to tail on to the end of that just with a couple of statistics. You know, I'm a numbers man. Two-thirds of people that leave never come back. And by that leaving, we mean by either disfellowshipment, disassociation, or fading. That's all of it included. Out of those two-thirds of people, 72 or 73% of those have severe mental trauma that they have to deal with. Wow. So for those listening that are planning their escape, and if we've helped, fantastic. Remember, it's very good if you can be in that top bracket, that top 30-odd%. The reality is you're not going to be. So if you're in that 70%, you are not a burden, you are not alone, and there is a massive world out there for you to discover, for you to really learn from, and it's incredible. So however you plan your escape, if Shelley and I have helped you today, fantastic, because you won't look back. Again, there's all those support networks that we've got. Comment on the video and we will do our best to help where we can.
So thanks everybody for sharing your experiences, and yeah, it's been really, really interesting. I think there's something relatable. We can all relate to one another in aspects of our exit and how we came to be here today. So and we hope it's helped the viewers. Thank you.